In my experience, respect is earned through actions, not words. But sometimes life presents you with a moment so perfectly timed that words become unnecessary. That's exactly what happened when my wife of 8 years called me a worthless loser in front of her secret lover at an upscale restaurant, only to see my CEO badge fall from my jacket pocket moments later. The look on their faces was worth every second of keeping my success hidden. I never planned to keep my position as Chief Executive Officer of Reynolds Technologies from Jessica, my wife of 8 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The deception wasn't premeditated. It evolved naturally from a simple misunderstanding during our early dating days. When we first met at a mutual friend's barbecue, I had just started as a junior executive at the company. Jessica assumed I was just another office worker, and I never corrected her. There was something refreshing about being liked for who I was, rather than what I could provide. Throughout our courtship and early marriage, I worked my way up the corporate ladder through countless late nights, strategic decisions, and an unwavering dedication to excellence. As I climbed higher, Jessica remained blissfully unaware, content with her assumption that I was stuck in middle management. I never lied about my career progression. I simply didn't broadcast it. My salary increases were explained away as bonuses, and small promotions, nothing that would raise suspicion. The company's meteoric rise under my leadership made headlines in business journals. But Jessica never showed any interest in my professional life. She was too absorbed in her own world of social media influence and luxury lifestyle blogging to notice that her underachieving husband was actually driving one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the region. When I became CEO 3 years ago, I considered telling her everything. But by then, our marriage had already started showing cracks. Jessica's attitude toward me had shifted from loving support to barely concealed contempt. She began comparing me to her friends' husbands, successful entrepreneurs and executives who flaunted their wealth and status. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mark from my yoga class just bought his wife a vacation home in the Hamptons, she'd say during dinner, her voice dripping with disappointment. Meanwhile, you're content with your little office job. I'd simply nod and continue eating, letting her assumptions feed her discontent. My executive assistant, Rachel, often questioned my decision to keep Jessica in the dark. "Sir, don't you think Mrs. Walker should know about your position?" She'd ask whenever Jessica called the office looking for me, believing she was speaking to just another secretary, rather than my right-hand person who managed a staff of 20. "It's better this way," I'd always reply. "She needs to see me for who I am, not what I've achieved." But as our marriage continued to deteriorate, I sometimes wondered if I was protecting our relationship or merely postponing its inevitable collapse. The truth is, I wanted Jessica to love me for me, the same way she did when we first met. I wanted her to see beyond titles and bank accounts to the man who still brought her coffee in bed every Sunday morning and remembered the exact shade of lilac she preferred for her birthday flowers. But somewhere along the way, she'd lost sight of that man, replacing him with a narrative of failure and disappointment that existed only in her mind. Last month, I started noticing changes in Jessica's behavior. She began coming home later than usual, claiming her influencer work required more networking events. Her phone was suddenly password protected, and she'd take calls in whispered tones on our balcony. I'm not naive, I recognized the signs, but rather than confront her immediately, I decided to wait and observe. After all, in business, timing is everything. My security team, a necessity I'd never mentioned to Jessica, kept me informed of her movements. They reported regular meetings with a man named Christopher Bennett, a self-styled entrepreneur who had more style than substance. I had my team run a background check. Bennett had a history of failed startups and questionable investments, but he presented himself as a successful business mogul on social media. Jessica, it seemed, had fallen for the very thing she accused me of lacking, the appearance of success. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Here was my wife, seeking excitement and status in the arms of a man who embodied everything she thought I wasn't, while unknowingly being married to someone who had achieved everything she desired. The deception had come full circle, but not in the way I had intended. I continued my routine, maintaining the facade of the unambitious husband while running a billion-dollar company. During the day, I made decisions that affected thousands of employees and shaped the future of technology. At night, I came home to a wife who looked at me with growing disdain, unaware that the little office job she mocked helped fund her luxurious lifestyle. The weight of the duplicity was beginning to wear on me. Every morning, as I put on my CEO badge to enter the secure executive floor of our headquarters, I questioned my choices. Was I protecting our marriage or enabling its destruction? Had my desire to be loved for myself created a barrier that could never be overcome? Little did I know, fate was about to force my hand in the most unexpected way. The truth I'd carefully guarded for years was about to explode into the open, triggered by a chance encounter that would change everything. Sometimes the most carefully constructed plans unravel in an instant, and that's exactly what was about to happen to mine. The signs of trouble were becoming impossible to ignore. What started as subtle jabs at my supposed lack of ambition had evolved into full-blown contempt. Jessica's comments grew sharper, more frequent, and increasingly public. She seemed to take particular pleasure in diminishing me in front of her. Growing social media following, often using my mediocrity as content for her lifestyle blog. Living your best life isn't about settling, she'd say in her Instagram stories, the camera panning to catch me reading a book in our living room. Sometimes we make choices that hold us back from our true potential. Her followers ate it up, flooding the comments with sympathetic messages about being stuck with an unambitious partner. The irony of her using our fully funded lifestyle to create content about overcoming financial limitations wasn't lost on me. Every designer bag she criticized me for not buying her, every luxury car she claimed we couldn't afford, every vacation she said was out of reach, all of it was within my means. The penthouse apartment she used as her filming backdrop was paid for by the very success she claimed I lacked. Our dinner conversations became battlegrounds. "I ran into Michael and Sarah today," she announced one evening, pushing her barely touched salmon around her plate. "He just made partner at his law firm. They're moving to that new development in Highland Park." Her eyes met mine, challenging. "Remember when you said you'd give me my dream house?" I took a sip of water, maintaining my composure. The irony was that I owned 3 properties in Highland Park through a separate holding company. "We have a comfortable life, Jessica," I replied evenly. "Not everyone needs a mansion to be happy." She scoffed, dropping her fork with a clatter. "Comfortable? Is that what you call this? God, you have no ambition, no drive. Do you know how embarrassing it is when my followers ask what my husband does, and I have to tell them you're just what is it you do again? Push papers around a desk." I could have ended it right there, could have pulled out my phone and shown her the Forbes article featuring me as one of the top CEOs under 40. Could have mentioned that the paper pushing she mocked had resulted in a company valuation that would make her lifestyle influencer friends' jaws drop. But I remained silent, letting her build her narrative. The distance between us grew wider with each passing day. Jessica started spending more time at networking events, coming home late with the scent of unfamiliar cologne clinging to her clothes. Her phone became a fortress of passwords and secret messages. She'd step out onto the balcony to take calls, speaking in hushed tones that carried undertones of intimacy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My security team kept me updated on her meetings with Christopher Bennett. They frequented upscale restaurants, sharing intimate dinners. While I was supposedly working late at my dead-end job, Bennett, ever the showman, would regale her with tales of his business ventures, most of which I knew to be fabrications. The man had more failed startups than successful coffee dates, but he played the part of the successful entrepreneur perfectly. One particularly painful evening, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. "I just can't do this anymore, Sarah," she whispered, unaware that I was in the hallway. "He's going nowhere in life. Chris says I deserve someone who can match my ambition, someone who understands success. David, he's a loser." The word hung in the air like poison. Loser. After 15 years of building a technology empire, after countless innovations and achievements, my own wife had reduced me to that single, cutting word. I stood there, my hand gripping the wall, as she continued to lay out my perceived failures to her sister. What made it worse was knowing that Christopher Bennett, the man she was comparing me to, had actually approached my company for funding 6 months ago. His pitch was as hollow as his Instagram persona, and I had personally rejected his proposal. Now he was seducing my wife with promises of the very success he had failed to achieve. The tension in our home became palpable. Jessica's influencer content took on a new theme: outgrowing relationships and knowing your worth. She filmed motivational speeches in our kitchen, using our marriage as a cautionary tale while I sat in my home office, reviewing acquisition proposals worth more than Bennett would see in a lifetime. My executive assistant, Rachel, became increasingly concerned. "Sir," she said one morning, after Jessica had called the office looking for me, "this isn't healthy. She's planning something, I can feel it. Maybe it's time to—" I cut her off with a raised hand. "Not yet, Rachel. Everything has its proper time." I had built my career on strategic patience, on knowing exactly when to reveal my cards. This situation would be no different. The final straw came during a charity gala I had secretly funded. Jessica attended as a social media influencer, not knowing I was the anonymous donor behind the entire event. I watched from the shadows as she worked the room with Christopher Bennett on her arm, introducing him as a successful tech entrepreneur to my own business associates, who shot knowing looks in my direction but maintained their discretion. Dang! Night, as she crawled into bed well past midnight, she didn't even bother to make up an excuse. The confidence in her deception was absolute, secured by her belief in my ignorance and mediocrity. Little did she know, the carefully constructed facade she believed in was about to crumble, and when it did, the fall would be spectacular. I lay awake that night, thinking about the path that had led us here. Every choice, every silence, every missed opportunity for honesty had contributed to this moment. The question wasn't whether our marriage would survive. It was already dead. The question was how its end would play out. And fate, it seemed, had a particularly ironic script in mind. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at the office early, my CEO badge securely clipped to my jacket's inner pocket, a habit I'd developed to maintain my secret at home. The irony of hiding my success had become almost comical, but today would prove to be anything but amusing. Jessica had been particularly cold at breakfast, barely acknowledging my presence as she scrolled through her phone, probably texting Bennett. I'd noticed she'd started dressing up more for her lunch meetings, and today was no exception. Her designer dress and carefully curated appearance screamed of a date rather than a business encounter. "I'm meeting some important investors today," she announced, not bothering to look up from her phone. "Don't wait up." The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. My security team had already informed me that she and Bennett had reservations at La Maison, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, one that, coincidentally, I owned through a subsidiary company. What Jessica didn't know was that this particular Tuesday would also host our company's board meeting at La Maison's private dining room. I had specifically chosen not to change either reservation when I discovered the conflict. After months of deception, perhaps it was time for worlds to collide. Throughout the morning, I handled acquisitions, approved strategic initiatives, and directed global operations, all while Jessica's Instagram stories showed her preparing for her big investor meeting with makeup tutorials and outfit choices. Each post was a fresh arrow of irony, especially when she mentioned taking control of her financial future while using the credit card I provided. Rachel, my executive assistant, entered my office just before lunch. "Sir, the board members will be arriving at La Maison at 1:30 and—" She hesitated. "Your wife's reservation with Mr. Bennett is for 1 hour in the main dining room." She gave me a knowing look. "Are you sure about this?" I straightened my tie, checking that my CEO badge was secure in my jacket pocket. "Sometimes, Rachel, the truth finds its own way out. We just need to be there to witness it." She nodded, understanding the weight of what was about to unfold. The drive to La Maison was surprisingly peaceful, my security detail discreetly positioned in separate vehicles, confirmed that Jessica and Bennett were already seated at a table that by pure coincidence, or perhaps fate, was visible from the entrance that I would need to use to reach the private dining room. As I stepped into the restaurant, I heard her laugh, that crystal-clear sound that used to bring me joy but had recently become the soundtrack to her deception. I could have taken the back entrance, could have avoided what was about to happen, but something in me had reached its breaking point. Jessica and Bennett were lost in conversation, her hand resting intimately on his arm as they shared what appeared to be an expensive bottle of champagne. The irony of Bennett spending my wife's money I had provided, to seduce her away from me, was almost poetic. I might have walked past unnoticed had it not been for Bennett himself. "Hey, isn't that your husband?" he said, loud enough to carry across the hushed restaurant. Jessica's head snapped up, her expression morphing from intimate happiness to shock, then quickly to disdain. "David!" she called out, her voice carrying that familiar tone of condescension. "What are you doing here? This is hardly your scene." The implication was clear. This restaurant was too expensive, too refined for someone of my supposed status. I paused, turning to face their table. Bennett sat there with the smug confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards, his arm now draped possessively around my wife's chair. The moment hung in the air, pregnant with possibilities. "I was just leaving," I said quietly. But Jessica wasn't done. Perhaps it was the champagne, or maybe she simply couldn't resist the opportunity to humiliate me in such an upscale setting. "David here," she announced to Bennett, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Works in some office, pushing papers or something equally inspiring." Her words dripped with sarcasm. "He's been at the same company for years, going nowhere. That's why I needed to meet someone with actual ambition, someone who understands success." Bennett chuckled, raising his glass in a mock toast. "No offense, man, but your wife deserves better than a corporate drone. She needs someone who can match her aspirations." The restaurant had grown quiet, other diners trying to pretend they weren't watching the drama unfold. Jessica, emboldened by the audience and Bennett's presence, delivered her coup de grace. "Let's be honest, David, you're a loser. You always have been. I've just finally found someone worthy of my time." It was at that precise moment that fate decided to play its hand. As I shifted to walk away, my jacket caught on a chair, and my CEO badge, the one physical symbol of everything I'd hidden, slipped from my pocket, landing face up on their table. Time seemed to freeze as Jessica's eyes locked onto the badge. I watched as confusion, disbelief, and then horror washed across her face. Bennett, ever the businessman, recognized the company logo instantly. After all, he'd pitched to us just months ago. "Reynolds Technologies," he stammered, his face draining of color. "But that's a CEO badge." The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's champagne glass slipped from her hand, spilling across the pristine white tablecloth. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling before my eyes, and for once she was speechless. "Yes," I said quietly, picking up my badge. "It is." The weight of the truth hung in the air like a guillotine blade, ready to drop. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to attend." The walk to the private dining room felt like crossing a threshold between two worlds. Behind me, I left the stunned silence of Jessica and Bennett's table. Ahead lay the familiar territory of corporate power and control. My security detail, ever present but invisible to most, shifted their positions as I moved through the restaurant. The board members were already seated when I arrived, their expressions carefully neutral. Of course, they had witnessed everything. The best seats in La Maison's private dining room offered a perfect view of the main floor. Thomas Chen, our longest-serving board member, caught my eye with a look of understanding. He had known me since my early days at Reynolds Technologies and had watched me build both my career and my marriage. "Shall we begin?" I asked, taking my seat at the head of the table. The meeting proceeded as planned, but there was an underlying current of energy in the room. Everyone present had just witnessed their CEO's personal life implode in spectacular fashion, yet we discussed quarterly projections and market expansions as if nothing had happened. Through the glass partition, I could see Jessica and Bennett's table. They hadn't moved, both frozen in the aftermath of the revelation. Jessica kept glancing toward the private dining room, her face a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. Bennett, for his part, looked like a man who had just realized he was swimming with sharks. Halfway through our discussion of Asian market penetration, my phone buzzed with messages from Jessica. "David, we need to talk. Please, let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. Why didn't you tell me?" I silenced the phone without reading. The rest. Rachel, who had been taking notes, gave me a supportive nod. She had watched this drama unfold for years, had fielded Jessica's condescending calls, and had kept my secret faithfully. Now she was witnessing its explosive conclusion. The board meeting lasted 2 hours. Throughout that time, I maintained my composure, made decisive calls on major investments, and approved strategic initiatives worth millions. All while my marriage publicly crumbled 30 feet away, it was perhaps the most surreal business meeting of my career. When we finally adjourned, Thomas stayed behind as the others filed out. "David," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of mentorship, "I've watched you build this company from nothing. You've handled every crisis with grace and strategy. But this," he gestured toward the main dining room, "this is different. Take care of yourself." I nodded, appreciating his concern. "Sometimes, Thomas, the most valuable things we build aren't companies or products. They're the boundaries we set for ourselves." As I stepped out of the private dining room, I found Jessica waiting in the hallway. She had clearly been crying, her perfectly applied makeup now smudged. Bennett was nowhere to be seen. Apparently his courage had evaporated, along with his illusions of superiority. "David, please," she started, reaching for my arm. "I had no idea. All this time you were... Why didn't you tell me?" I gently moved past her, maintaining my distance. "Would it have made a difference, Jessica?" Would knowing I was CEO have made you respect me more as a person? Love me more as a husband? Of course it would have, she exclaimed, following me toward the exit. Do you know how hard it's been, thinking you had no ambition, no drive? I've been living like what? I turned to face her. Like someone married to a loser, a corporate drone? Please finish that thought. Her face flushed with shame. I didn't mean those things. I was just frustrated. And Chris Bennett. I couldn't help but laugh. The man whose business proposal I personally rejected 6 months ago. The one with 3 failed startups and a history of investor fraud. Yes, he's quite the catch. Jessica's eyes widened. What? No, he's a successful entrepreneur. He showed me his portfolio. He showed you what he wanted you to see, I said quietly. Just like you showed your followers what they wanted to see. A successful influencer trapped in a marriage with an underachiever. It made for great content, didn't it? The truth hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled back, catching herself against the wall. David, please, we can fix this. Now that you know I'm wealthy, now that you know I have power, that's not fixing anything, Jessica. That's just changing the math of your equation. I straightened my tie, a habit from countless business negotiations. The time for fixing things was before you decided I wasn't worthy of your respect. Security approached discreetly, positioning themselves between us. Jessica noticed them for the first time, another piece of my hidden world clicking into place. Have they been watching me? They've been watching everything, I confirmed. Every meeting with Bennett, every lie about investor lunches, every time you used my money to fund your affair. It's all documented. The color drained from her face. You knew all this time? I knew everything. I wanted to see what you would do, who you would choose to be when you thought nobody was watching. And you showed me, Jessica. You showed me exactly who you are. The aftermath of the La Maison incident spread through our social circles like wildfire. Jessica's carefully curated online persona began to crack as rumors circulated about her affair with Bennett and the shocking revelation of my position. Her influencer followers, always hungry for drama, started piecing together the truth from various sources. I returned to our penthouse that evening to find Jessica waiting in the living room. She had changed out of her designer dress into casual clothes, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, a calculated attempt to appear more like the woman I had first fallen in love with. The irony wasn't lost on me. We need to talk, she said, standing as I entered. The room felt different now, the expensive furnishings she had always complained about suddenly taking on new meaning in her eyes. About everything. Everything is a lot to cover, I replied, loosening my tie. Should we start with your affair, or would you prefer to discuss how you've spent years mocking me on social media? She flinched at my directness. I know I've made mistakes, David, terrible mistakes, but you've been lying to me too. All these years, pretending to be something you're not. Interesting perspective, I interrupted, pouring myself a drink. I never lied, Jessica. I simply didn't correct your assumptions. You never asked about my work because you were too busy deciding I wasn't successful enough for you. How was I supposed to know? Her voice rose with frustration. You come home every day acting like a regular employee, never talking about your achievements, hiding everything about your success. Success isn't something you wear like your designer clothes, I said quietly. It's not about appearances or social media posts. I wanted a wife who loved me for who I am, not what I own. And what about what I wanted? She demanded. Do you know how humiliating it's been, thinking my husband had no ambition, watching other wives live these amazing lives while I thought I was stuck with a loser? I finished for her. Yes, you made that quite clear at lunch today. Tell me, Jessica, how's Christopher Bennett handling the revelation that his girlfriend's loser husband is the same CEO who rejected his business proposal? She sank onto the sofa, her facade crumbling. Chris isn't. He's not what I thought. He was. No, he's exactly what I knew he was, a fraud. Just like your social media persona, just like our marriage. I moved to the window, looking out over the city I had helped shape. The difference is, I saw through both of you from the start. What do you mean you saw through both of us? She stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. Have you been having me followed? Of course I have. I'm the CEO of a major technology company. Did you think I wouldn't have security, wouldn't protect my interests? I turned to face her. Every lunch date with Bennett, every lie about meetings, every time you used my credit cards to fund your affair, it's all documented. The color drained from her face. You've been spying on me. How dare you? How dare I? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're having an affair with a known fraud, spending my money to do it, and publicly humiliating me on your social media platforms, and you're worried about your privacy? Those posts weren't about you specifically, she protested weakly. I was just creating content my followers could relate to. Content? Is that what our marriage was to you? Content? I pulled out my phone, opening her Instagram page. Let's review some of your greatest hits, shall we? When your dreams are bigger than his ambitions. Sometimes the biggest obstacle to success is the person sharing your bed. Don't let a small-minded man clip your wings. Should I continue? Tears welled in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from shame or frustration. I never meant you meant every word. I cut her off. Just like you meant it today when you called me a loser in front of Bennett. The only difference is, now you're realizing those words might cost you something. Cost me. Her voice sharpened. What exactly do you mean by that? I walked to my briefcase and pulled out a folder. I mean this. Divorce papers, Jessica. Already. Drawn up, just waiting for signatures. She stared at the folder as if it might bite her. Divorce. David, no, we can work this out. Now that I know who you really are. That's exactly the problem, I said, placing the folder on the coffee table. You only want to work it out because of who I am professionally. The man I am, the one you've been belittling and cheating on, hasn't changed. Just your perception of his worth. That's not fair, she exclaimed. You deceived me about your position, your success. How can you blame me for reacting to what you showed me? I showed you myself, the real me, without the titles, without the wealth, and you showed me exactly how much that was worth to you. I gestured to the folder. The papers are quite generous, more than generous, considering the documented infidelity. My lawyers will contact yours tomorrow. Jessica reached. For me, her eyes desperate. Please don't do this. I love you. No, I said quietly, stepping back. You love what you just discovered about me. There's a difference. I picked up my briefcase and headed toward the door. You have until tomorrow evening to decide if you want to sign amicably. After that, things will become significantly less generous. Where are you going? She called after me, panic creeping into her voice. To my other apartment, I replied. One of many properties you never knew about because you were too busy looking down on me to notice what was right in front of you. I left her standing there, surrounded by the luxury she had always complained was missing from her life, finally understanding the true cost of her choices. Sometimes the most expensive things we lose aren't measured in dollars, but in trust, respect, and love. The next 48 hours unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of chaos. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Jessica, each one more desperate than the last. She oscillated between begging for forgiveness and attempting to justify her actions. Meanwhile, her carefully constructed social media empire began to crumble. The truth about her affair with Bennett had leaked, though I suspect some of her loyal followers had done the leaking. Her latest post, a philosophical musing about outgrowing relationships, had backfired spectacularly when someone commented with a photo of her and Bennett at La Maison, taken just before my CEO badge revelation. I watched it all unfold. From my private apartment in the city's most exclusive district, a property Jessica had never known existed. Rachel kept me updated on the professional fallout, though she seemed more concerned about my personal well-being. "Sir," she said during our morning briefing, "Jessica has called the office 17 times since yesterday. She's becoming insistent." I took a sip of my coffee, reviewing the quarterly reports on my tablet. "And what exactly is she insisting about?" "She's demanding to know about your assets, your real position, everything she claims you hid from her." Rachel's disapproval was evident in her tone. "She's also trying to reach board members directly." "Of course she is," I murmured. "She's realizing that her lifestyle influencer salary won't maintain the standard of living she's grown accustomed to. How's Bennett handling the situation?" Rachel's lips twitched with barely suppressed amusement. "He's been trying to schedule a meeting with you. Says he has an exciting new business proposition that could benefit everyone involved." I couldn't help but laugh at the audacity. "I'm sure he does. Deny his requests. All of them." The situation at home, according to my security team, was equally chaotic. Jessica had called in reinforcements, her sister Sarah and two of her influencer friends, for what she termed an emergency strategy session. They'd arrived at the penthouse with bottles of wine and determined expressions, presumably to help her plan her next move. What they didn't know was that every conversation in that penthouse was being recorded, a security measure I'd implemented years ago to protect company information I sometimes worked with at home. Jessica's strategy session proved to be quite illuminating. "You can't let him just walk away." Sarah's voice came through clearly in the security recording. "Do you know how much he's worth? The company's value alone." I know." Jessica's voice was thick with tears. "But he's so angry. You should have seen him all this time, I thought." "It doesn't matter what you thought," another voice chimed in. Probably her friend Melissa, a lifestyle coach who specialized in dating wealthy men. "What matters is what you do now. You're still his wife. You have rights." The conversation devolved into a detailed discussion of divorce strategies and asset division, with occasional breaks for wine-fueled rants about my deception and how I had trapped Jessica in a false narrative about our financial situation. The irony of their indignation was almost amusing. Jessica had spent years building her brand around being the ambitious wife held back by her underachieving husband. Now that the truth was out, she was scrambling to rewrite our entire history. My lawyer, Michael Sterling, visited me at the office to discuss the situation. "She's hired Patricia Morrison," he informed me, referring to one of the city's most aggressive divorce attorneys. "They're going to try to paint you as manipulative, claim you deliberately deceived her about your financial situation to control her." I leaned back in my chair, watching the city skyline through my office windows. And what about her affair, her public disparagement, the documented misuse of company funds? Michael smiled grimly. "Already compiled and ready to use." "But David, they're going to get nasty. Morrison's known for her scorched earth approach. Are you sure you don't want to consider a quiet settlement?" "Michael," I said quietly, "for years I watched Jessica tear down my character for her social media content. I listened to her mock my ambitions, belittle my work, and ultimately betray our marriage. A quiet settlement would just be one more way of hiding the truth, and I'm done hiding." The rest of the day brought a fresh wave of complications. Jessica had apparently discovered that her credit cards, all linked to my accounts, had been frozen. Her reaction was predictably explosive. "You can't do this to me," her voicemail screamed. "I built my brand, my following, my entire lifestyle around our life together. You owe me more than this." What Jessica failed to understand was that she had built her brand on a lie of her own making. She had created content around being the ambitious woman tied to an underachiever, garnered sympathy and support for her struggle, and monetized our supposed financial limitations. Now that the truth was out, her entire narrative was unraveling. By evening, my security team reported that Jessica had left the penthouse with several suitcases, presumably heading to her sister's house. She'd posted one final message before, going dark on social media. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than we think, taking time to reflect and heal. The comment section exploded with speculation, but I didn't bother reading them. Instead, I focused on the stack of documents Rachel had prepared for tomorrow's board meeting. Life and business moved on. Later that night, as I sat in my private apartment reviewing the day's events, I received one final text from Jessica. "I know you think I only care about your money and position now, but there's so much you don't understand. Please give me a chance to explain." I left the message unread. Some explanations come too late, and some truths, once revealed, can never be hidden again. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, I had work to do. After all, that's what losers like me do best. We keep moving forward, regardless of who believes in us. News of our impending divorce spread through corporate circles like a virus infecting every conversation and business meeting. Patricia Morrison, Jessica's attorney, wasted no time in launching her offensive. The first salvo came in the form of a leaked insider story to a popular business blog, painting me as a manipulative spouse who had deliberately kept my wife in the dark about our financial status. Sources close to the situation claim that David Walker, CEO of Reynolds Technologies, engaged in a years-long campaign of psychological manipulation. The article read, his wife, successful lifestyle influencer Jessica Walker, was reportedly kept unaware of their true financial situation as part of a calculated effort to maintain control. Rachel placed the printout of the article on my desk with her usual efficiency. "They're trying to control the narrative," she observed. Mrs. Walker's social media following has been sharing this extensively. I skimmed the article, noting the careful way it danced around any mention of Jessica's affair with Bennett. "And what about Mr. Bennett? Has he made any further attempts to contact us?" "3 calls this morning alone," Rachel replied. "He's becoming desperate. Apparently, some of his investors are asking questions about his relationship with the wife of Reynolds Technologies' CEO. The irony wasn't lost on me. Bennett, who had been so quick to mock my supposed lack of success, was now watching his own carefully constructed image crumble. His social media profiles had gone quiet, his usually boastful posts about business ventures replaced by a deafening silence. But Jessica was far from finished. That afternoon, my lawyer forwarded me a list of demands from Morrison's office. They wanted access to all my financial records dating back to before our marriage, claiming I had deliberately hidden assets to manipulate Jessica's lifestyle choices. They're also requesting all communication records between you and your security team, Michael informed me during our emergency meeting. They're trying to build a case around invasion of privacy and emotional manipulation. I couldn't help but laugh. They want to discuss invasion of privacy? After Jessica spent years broadcasting our personal life to her followers, after she used my supposed mediocrity as content for her brand. "This isn't about logic, David," Michael cautioned. "Morrison's playing to emotions. She's going to paint Jessica as a victim of psychological manipulation, trapped in a marriage where she was deliberately kept in the dark about her own financial status." The strategy became clearer that evening when Jessica finally made her return to social media. It was a carefully crafted post, complete with a tastefully filtered photo of her looking pensively out a window. "Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us deepest," she wrote. "For years, I believed I was supporting my husband's modest career, only to discover our entire marriage was built on deception. The truth about financial abuse and manipulation isn't always obvious. It can look like protecting someone from the truth. It can feel like letting them find their own path. But control is control, no matter how it's disguised. The post went viral within hours, with her followers rallying around her narrative of being the victim of financial manipulation. Comments flooded in, praising her bravery and condemning my alleged deception. The story was picking up traction in online business communities as well, though with more skepticism. "They're trying to force a settlement," Michael advised during our late-night call. "Morrison knows that Reynolds Technologies board won't want this kind of publicity dragging on. She's betting you'll pay to make it go away." But what Jessica and her legal team didn't understand was that I had spent years building not just a company, but a reputation for integrity. My board knew me, trusted me, and most importantly, had witnessed Jessica's behavior firsthand at La Maison. The next morning, Thomas Chen, my senior board member, stopped by my office. "David, the board has been discussing the situation," he began, his expression serious. "We want you to know that we stand behind you. Your personal life is your business, but if you need the company's resources to protect your reputation, they're at your disposal." I appreciated the support, but I had already set my own plans in motion. While Jessica was busy trying to control the narrative through social media, I had my team preparing a comprehensive record of her behavior over the years. Her public disparagement of me, her unauthorized use of company funds for her affair with Bennett, and most damaging of all, her attempts to leverage insider information about Reynolds Technologies in her conversations with Bennett. "Sir," Rachel interrupted my thoughts with a gentle knock. "There's something you need to see." She handed me her tablet, displaying a live stream of Jessica's latest Instagram story. My soon-to-be ex-wife was staging what appeared to be an intervention of sorts, surrounded by her influencer friends and speaking directly to the camera. "I've stayed silent long enough," she declared, tears glistening perfectly in her eyes. "It's a time for the world to know the true David Walker, the man behind the CEO title. And believe me, there's so much more to this story than anyone knows." I watched the performance with a mixture of amusement and disappointment. Jessica had always been talented at crafting narratives that portrayed her as the protagonist in her own drama. But this time, she was playing a dangerous game with forces she didn't fully understand. "Rachel," I said, handing back the tablet, "I think it's time we release those documents to Michael. All of them." She nodded, understanding the implications. "Including the recordings from the penthouse?" "Especially those," I confirmed. "Let's see how Morrison handles the truth when it's not filtered through an Instagram lens." The game was escalating, moving beyond the realm of social media drama into something more serious. Jessica had chosen to make this public, to turn our private life into content for her brand. Now she would learn that some stories can't be controlled. With careful editing and strategic filters, as I watched the city lights flicker on from my office window, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. Jessica had spent years crafting a narrative about being held back by an unambitious husband. Now she was trying to spin a new story about being controlled by a manipulative CEO. But she had forgotten one crucial detail. In both versions, she had cast herself as the victim, never considering that she might actually be the villain in someone else's story. The final confrontation wasn't something I had planned, but looking back, it was inevitable. It happened 3 weeks after the La Maison incident, in the same place where our marriage had begun, the grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel. I was there for a Technology Innovation Awards ceremony. Reynolds Technologies was receiving recognition for our breakthrough in sustainable energy solutions. Jessica, as I would learn, was there for a very different reason. The evening had started normally enough. I was seated at the main table with other industry leaders, listening to presentations about technological advancements and future innovations. Rachel, ever vigilant, had positioned herself nearby, occasionally sliding notes about ongoing business, matters that required my attention. "Mr. Walker," the host announced, "would you please join us on stage to accept the award for revolutionary innovation in green technology?" As I stood straightening my tie, I noticed a commotion at the entrance. Jessica was there, looking stunning in a designer dress I had bought her months ago, with Christopher Bennett trailing behind her like a reluctant shadow. Their presence wasn't a coincidence. She had planned this. I took the stage, accepting the award with a practiced smile, and began my prepared speech about innovation and responsibility. That's when Jessica made her move. "Responsibility?" she called out, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "Why don't you tell them about your responsibility to your wife, David?" The room fell silent. Hundreds of the most influential people in the tech industry turned to stare as Jessica strode down the center aisle, Bennett awkwardly following in her wake. Security started to move, but I held up a hand to stop them. This confrontation had been brewing for weeks. Might as well let it play out here. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jessica continued, her voice trembling with what I recognized as practiced emotion, "you're all celebrating a man who built his success on deception, who manipulated and controlled his own wife while pretending to be something he wasn't." I remained at the podium, outwardly calm. "Jessica, this isn't the place for personal matters." "No?" She was halfway to the stage now. "Where is the place, David?" "In private, where you can control the narrative like you controlled everything else." Bennett, looking increasingly uncomfortable, tried to grab her arm. "Jess, maybe we should—" She shook him off. "No, everyone needs to know the truth. About the lies, the manipulation, the years of keeping me in the dark about our real financial situation." I noticed several people in the audience recording this on their phones. Of course they were. Drama like this was social media gold. Jessica had probably counted on that. "The truth?" I finally said, my voice quiet, but carrying across the now silent room. "Are you sure that's what you want, Jessica? The complete truth?" She faltered for a moment, perhaps catching something in my tone, but pressed on. "Yes, the truth about how you deceived me, made me believe we were struggling while you built your empire." I nodded to Rachel, who immediately understood. The large screens behind me, meant for presentations, flickered to life. What appeared made Jessica freeze mid-stride. It was her own social media feed, post after post, scrolling past. Her carefully crafted messages mocking her underachieving husband, videos of her using our marriage as content for her brand, screenshots of her conversations with Bennett, planning meetings while using company funds. "The truth," I said into the microphone, "is that I never lied about who I was. You simply never cared enough to ask. You were too busy building your brand around being the ambitious wife held back by her mediocre husband." The screens continued their damning display. Jessica's face had gone pale, but I wasn't finished. "The truth is that while you were mocking me online, I was building something meaningful. While you were having an affair with a failed entrepreneur," Bennett winced visibly, "I was creating technology that will help millions. I never hid my success from you, Jessica. You just couldn't see past your own assumptions and prejudices to notice it. That's not," she stammered, but the evidence was playing out behind me for everyone to see. "Would you like to discuss the company funds you misappropriated for your affair?" I continued, my voice still calm. "Or perhaps the confidential information you shared with Mr. Bennett here, hoping to help him secure investment for his latest failed venture?" Bennett had started backing away, clearly realizing this wasn't going to play out the way they had planned. Jessica stood alone in the center aisle, her carefully orchestrated moment of vindication crumbling around her. You wanted the truth exposed, Jessica? Well, here it is. I'm not the villain in your story. I'm just the man who finally stopped enabling your delusions. The silence in the room was absolute. Jessica's face had crumpled, tears streaming down. Her cheeks, real ones this time, not the carefully orchestrated ones from her social media posts. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room. I apologize for this interruption. My soon-to-be ex-wife seems to have forgotten that truth, like success, isn't something you can filter and edit to suit your narrative. Security finally moved in, gently but firmly escorting Jessica and Bennett from the ballroom. As they left, I could hear her sobbing, but it no longer moved me. The woman I had loved was long gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I returned to my prepared speech, talking about innovation and the future of technology. The audience, perhaps impressed by my composure, responded with enthusiastic applause. Later, Thomas Chen would tell me it was the most memorable award ceremony he'd ever attended. As the evening wound down, Rachel approached with my phone. "Sir, your lawyer called. Apparently Mrs. Walker's attorney is suddenly very interested in discussing an amicable settlement." I couldn't help but smile. I imagine she is. After tonight, I doubt Morrison wants any of this going to court. The truth, in all its unfiltered glory, had finally set us both free. Jessica had wanted to expose our story to the world. She just hadn't expected it to be the real story, rather than the version she had crafted for her followers. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against deception isn't more deception. It's simply the unvarnished truth, played out for all to see. In the weeks following the awards ceremony confrontation, life took on a different rhythm. The divorce proceedings, once contentious, moved forward with surprising speed. Patricia Morrison, faced with irrefutable evidence of Jessica's misconduct, advised her client to accept a modest settlement rather than risk further exposure in court. My focus shifted entirely to Reynolds Technologies and personal growth. The company was thriving, with our green technology initiatives attracting international attention. But more importantly, I was rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under years of maintaining appearances. "Sir," Rachel said one morning, placing a stack of newspapers on my desk, "you might want to see these." The headlines were variations on a theme. Tech CEO's ex-wife loses influencer empire, and social media stars fall from grace after public. Meltdown. I skimmed the articles without much interest. Jessica's carefully constructed online persona had crumbled in the aftermath of the awards ceremony. Her followers, once sympathetic to her narrative of being the ambitious wife held back by an underachieving husband, had turned on her when the truth emerged. The video of her confrontation, complete with the damning evidence displayed on those screens, had gone viral in the worst possible way. Her latest post has only gotten 12 likes, Rachel added, trying to hide a smile. Quite a fall from her usual thousands. "And Bennett?" I asked, more out of curiosity than concern. "Last seen trying to pitch his revolutionary business idea to venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. No takers so far." She paused. "Your security team reports he's been using your name in his pitches, claiming inside knowledge of Reynolds Technologies." I shook my head. "Forward that information to legal. Let them handle it." But my mind wasn't on Jessica or Bennett anymore. Instead, I found myself focusing on personal renewal. I started small, reinstating my morning gym routine, which I'd abandoned years ago when Jessica complained about the early hours. I reclaimed my love for classical music, filling my new apartment with the sounds of Bach and Beethoven that Jessica had always dismissed as boring. The changes weren't just personal. At work, I found myself more engaged, more present. Without the constant drain of maintaining a facade at home, my energy could be fully directed toward innovation and leadership. "You seem different," Thomas Chen observed during a board meeting. More yourself. He was right. I had spent so long playing down my success, tempering my achievements to maintain Jessica's narrative, that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to simply be myself. The transformation extended to my living space as well. I moved permanently into my private apartment, redesigning it to reflect my own tastes rather than Jessica's carefully curated aesthetic. Gone were the Instagram-worthy furnishings chosen for their photogenic qualities, replaced by comfortable leather chairs, walls lined with books, and art that spoke to my soul rather than social media metrics. One evening, as I sat in my new study, reviewing quarterly reports, Rachel brought in an interesting piece of news. "Sir, remember that sustainable energy project you wanted to pursue? The one Jessica always said was a waste of resources?" I looked up, intrigued. "The solar integration initiative? Yes, the preliminary results are in." She handed me a tablet with the data. "It's exceeding all expectations. We're looking at potential energy cost reductions of up to 60% in target areas." The project had been a passion of mine for years, but Jessica had constantly dismissed it as thinking too small. She had pushed for flashier, more marketable initiatives that would look better on social media. Now, freed from that influence, I could pursue innovations that actually mattered. My relationship with my employees changed too. Without the constant pressure to maintain Jessica's illusion of my mediocrity, I could be more open, more authentic in my leadership style. The office culture flourished under this new transparency. "The team appreciates seeing the real you," Rachel commented one day. "They always knew you were competent, but now they're seeing your passion for the work." Even my security team noticed the difference. "Sir," my head of security reported, "it's much easier to protect someone who isn't hiding anymore." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. I had spent years hiding my success to preserve a marriage that had been built on false premises. Now, embracing my true self, I found the authenticity I had always sought. One particular morning, about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected email. It was from a small technology education initiative I had secretly funded years ago. They had successfully graduated their first class of underprivileged students, all of whom had secured positions in top tech companies. "Your support made this possible," the program director wrote. "Would you consider being our keynote speaker at the next graduation?" In the past, I would have declined, worried about maintaining my low profile. Now, I immediately accepted. It was time to use my position and success to make a real difference, not hide it to protect someone else's narrative. The transformation wasn't just about professional success or personal comfort. It was about reclaiming my authentic self, about remembering who I was beneath the layers of compromise and concealment that had accumulated over the years. "You know," Rachel said one evening as she was leaving the office, "sometimes losing something that's wrong for us is the first step to finding what's right." She was right. The end of my marriage, painful as it had been, had freed me to become a better leader, a more authentic person, and ironically, a more successful CEO than ever before. Sometimes the greatest growth comes not from what we gain, but from what we have the courage to let go. The old saying claims that success is the best revenge. But I had learned something more valuable. Success isn't about revenge at all. It's about being true to yourself, pursuing your passions, and making a real difference in the world. Everything else is just noise, filtered or unfiltered. As the dust settled from the divorce, life took on a new rhythm that felt more authentic than anything I'd experienced in years. The settlement had been finalized with surprising speed. Jessica's legal team, faced with overwhelming evidence of her misconduct, had advised her to accept terms that were fair, but far from the windfall she'd initially demanded. One morning, About 6 months after the awards ceremony confrontation, I sat in my office reviewing an article in the Technology Innovation Quarterly. Our green energy initiative had made the cover, highlighting the project's unprecedented success in reducing energy costs for low-income communities. "Sir," Rachel interrupted my reading, "you might find this interesting." She handed me her tablet, displaying Jessica's latest social media post, her first in months. "Life teaches us humbling lessons," the post read. "Sometimes what we think we want isn't what we need, and the image we project to the world becomes a prison of our own making. I'm taking time to reflect and rebuild away from social media." The post had a fraction of her former engagement. Her, a carefully curated influencer empire, had crumbled in the wake of our divorce, her followers drifting away as the truth about her carefully constructed narrative emerged. "Bennett's been trying to reach you again," Rachel added, taking back the tablet. "He's claiming to have valuable insights into competitor strategies." I couldn't help but laugh. Let me guess, he's running out of investors to scam. Apparently, having an affair with the wife of a tech CEO doesn't do wonders for one's business reputation, Rachel replied dryly. The mention of business reputation reminded me of an upcoming event, Reynolds Technology's annual innovation conference. This year would be different. Instead of hiding in the background as I had during my marriage, I would be delivering the keynote address. "The speech is ready for your review," Rachel said, anticipating my thoughts. "The focus is on authentic leadership and sustainable innovation." Authentic leadership. The phrase struck a chord. For years, I'd led from behind a carefully constructed veil of mediocrity, tempering my vision to maintain Jessica's narrative. Now, freed from those constraints, I could fully embrace my role as not just a CEO, but a leader with a mission. The transformation wasn't limited to my professional life. My private apartment had become a true home, reflecting my interests rather than Jessica's Instagram aesthetic. Books lined the walls, real books, not just decorative ones chosen for their spine color. My piano, which Jessica had banished to storage as too cluttered-looking, once again occupied a place of honor. One evening, as I was practicing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, Thomas Chen stopped by for our weekly strategy discussion. He paused in the doorway, listening. "You never mentioned you played," he observed as I finished. "It didn't fit the image," I replied, closing the piano lid. "Jessica thought it made me look too intellectual." Thomas shook his head. "You know, David, I've known you for 15 years, but I feel like I'm only now meeting the real you." His words resonated. The real me. For so long I'd compartmentalized my life, the successful CEO at work, the supposedly mediocre husband at home. Now those walls had crumbled, allowing me to be fully myself in all aspects of my life. The key change was reflected in my leadership style as well. No longer concerned with maintaining a false image, I could mentor young entrepreneurs, share insights openly, and pursue innovations that excited me rather than those that would look good. On social media, the Sustainable Energy Project is expanding, I told Thomas as we reviewed quarterly projections. "We're implementing it in 3 more communities next month." The project Jessica called Thinking Too Small? Thomas smiled. Funny how small thinking can lead to big changes. He was right. While Jessica had pushed for flashy, marketable initiatives, our small project was actually transforming lives, reducing energy costs for thousands of families. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to appear successful through Jessica's lens, I had nearly lost sight of what real success meant, making a tangible difference in people's lives. A week later, I received an unexpected letter. It was from a young engineer in our Sustainable Energy division, thanking me for supporting her project despite initial skepticism from the board. "Your willingness to back innovation over image has changed how we see leadership," she wrote. It's inspiring to work for someone who values substance over style. The letter touched something deep within me. This was the legacy I wanted to build. Not an Instagram-worthy facade, but real impact, measured in lives improved and innovations realized. As I prepared for the upcoming innovation conference, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The painful end of my marriage had also been a beginning, a return to authenticity, to pursuing what truly mattered. "Your keynote speech is scheduled for 10 a.m., Rachel reminded me, placing the final version on my desk. "The auditorium is already sold out." I glanced at the speech's opening lines. "Success isn't about perception, it's about impact. It's about staying true to your vision, even when others can't see it." A year ago, I would have softened those words, worried about how they might affect Jessica's narrative. Now they felt right, a testament to the lessons learned and the freedom found in authenticity. The real measure of success, I had learned, wasn't in hiding who you are, but in fully embracing it. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is simply be ourselves, unapologetically and completely. A year after the divorce, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Reynolds Technologies was thriving. Our sustainable energy projects were expanding globally, and I had finally found peace in living authentically. But life, as I've learned, has a way of surprising you just when you think everything is figured out. It began with an unusual email from Rachel one morning. "Sir, there's something you need to see," she wrote. "A former employee from Bennett's last failed startup has come forward with some interesting information." The attached documents revealed something startling. During his affair with Jessica, Bennett hadn't just been after company secrets or financial gain. He had been gathering information for a much larger scheme, one that involved several of our competitors and a planned hostile takeover of Reynolds Technologies. "The timing matches," Rachel explained as we reviewed the evidence in my office. "His chance meeting with Jessica at that charity gala last year wasn't chance at all. He had been tracking her social media, looking for vulnerabilities in your relationship. The revelation cast our entire history in a new light. Jessica's sudden interest in my work life, her increasing criticism, the public humiliation. It had all been part of a calculated plan to destabilize both my personal life and my position at the company. They were hoping for a messy divorce," Rachel continued. "Something that would force you to sell your controlling shares or step down as CEO. Bennett was working with Harrison Tech. They were going to fund his next venture in exchange for helping them acquire Reynolds." I sat back in my chair, processing this information. "And Jessica, was she part of this plan?" Rachel hesitated. "That's where it gets complicated. According to our source, Bennett was manipulating her too. He used her influencer status and her frustration with your perceived lack of success to position himself as both a romantic interest and a business mentor." The evidence was compelling. Text messages, emails, and meeting recordings showed Bennett slowly working to turn Jessica against me, all while feeding information to Harrison Tech's acquisition team. "Sir," my head of security entered with more files, "we've uncovered something else. Remember those unauthorized transfers Jessica made during their affair? They weren't just for hotels and restaurants. Some of the money went to offshore accounts, linked to Harrison Tech subsidiaries." The pieces were falling into place. Jessica's dramatic confrontation at the awards ceremony hadn't just been about emotional revenge. It had been intended to publicly humiliate me, to weaken my position with the board and create an opening for Harrison's takeover attempt. "Have you contacted Jessica about this?" I asked Rachel. "She came to us," Rachel replied, surprising me. "That's how we got most of this information. She's been cooperating with our legal team for the past month." Later that afternoon, I received a hand-delivered letter from Jessica. The handwriting was shaky, unlike her usually perfect script. "David, I know it's too late for apologies, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. but you deserve to know the truth. Chris didn't just seduce me. He manipulated me into becoming a weapon against you. I was so caught up in my own insecurities, so desperate to prove myself, that I didn't see how I was being used. I'm not trying to excuse my actions. The affairs, the public humiliation, the betrayal, those choices were mine, and I'll live with that guilt. But when I discovered the larger plan, when I realized how my bitterness and pride had made me a pawn in their game, I couldn't stay silent. I've provided everything I know to your legal team. Texts, emails, recordings, everything that shows. Bennett's connection to Harrison Tech and their planned takeover. Use it however you need to. You were right all along. Success isn't about appearance or public perception. It's about integrity, about staying true to yourself. I lost sight of that, and in the process I lost the one person who truly cared about who I was, not what I appeared to be. Jessica. The letter felt heavy in my hands, weighted with implications and unspoken regrets. I called an emergency board meeting to discuss the situation. This changes things, Thomas Chen said after we reviewed the evidence. Harrison Tech wasn't just attempting a hostile takeover. They were engaging in corporate espionage. We need to act. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal actions and strategic moves. Harrison Tech's scheme was exposed, their stock plummeted, and Bennett found himself facing federal charges for his role in the conspiracy. Jessica's cooperation proved crucial. Her detailed testimony about Bennett's manipulation and Harrison Tech's involvement provided the evidence we needed to not just defend against the takeover, but to acquire several of Harrison's key assets at a fraction of their value. The press is calling it the corporate takedown of the decade, Rachel reported, showing me the headlines. Harrison Tech's CEO has resigned and their board is in chaos. The irony wasn't lost on me. What had started as a plot to destroy me had ended up making Reynolds Technologies stronger than ever. Our stock value had doubled, and our sustainable energy projects were now positioned to expand into markets previously dominated by Harrison. But the real twist came during the federal investigation. As authorities dug deeper into Bennett's schemes, they uncovered something unexpected. Evidence that he had attempted similar manipulations with other CEOs' spouses, though none as successfully as with Jessica. He was a professional con man, my head of security explained. He targeted successful executives through their partners, looking for relationships he could exploit for corporate gain. Jessica wasn't his first victim, but she was his most successful play, until it backfired. This revelation left me with complicated feelings. Jessica's betrayal had been real, her choices her own. But understanding the extent of Bennett's manipulation added layers of complexity to our story. One evening, as I sat in my study reviewing the final reports from our legal team, Rachel brought in one last piece of information. Jessica's posted. Her last message on social media, she said, showing me the post. Goodbye to all my followers. The life I presented here was a carefully curated lie, one that almost destroyed something precious. I'm stepping away from social media permanently, not because I'm hiding, but because I'm finally ready to live in truth rather than appearances. Sometimes the biggest influencer in our lives should be our own conscience. The post had no filters, no careful lighting, no strategic hashtags. For the first time since I'd known her, Jessica was presenting herself exactly as she was, flawed, humbled, but perhaps finally real. The twist in our story hadn't changed the past, hadn't erased the pain or justified the betrayal. But it had added a dimension of understanding, a reminder that truth, like success, often has layers that aren't visible on the surface. As I closed the final report on the Harrison Tech takeover, I realized that sometimes the greatest plot twists in life aren't about dramatic revelations. They're about understanding that every story, even ones we think we know by heart, can contain unexpected depths and hidden truths. 3 years have passed since the Harrison Tech revelation, and looking back, it's remarkable how much can change when truth finally comes to light. Reynolds Technologies has grown beyond my wildest expectations. Our sustainable energy projects now serve communities across 5 continents, and the lessons I learned from my failed marriage have shaped me into a better leader and person. The exposure of Harrison Tech's scheme became a watershed moment in corporate history. Their attempted hostile takeover, using personal relationships as weapons, led to sweeping changes in corporate governance and security protocols across the industry. Thomas Chen often jokes that we should thank them. Their failed attack, ultimately, made us stronger than ever. "You know," he said during our latest board meeting, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had been the kind of CEO who flaunted his success from the start." "We probably wouldn't be here," I replied, looking out over our expanded headquarters. "Success isn't about what you show the world, it's about what you build when no one's watching." Jessica's story took an unexpected turn. After disappearing from social media, she channeled her experience into something meaningful. She now works with a non-profit organization that helps people recover from online addiction and social media-driven anxiety. Her testimony against Bennett and Harrison Tech earned her a degree of redemption, though we maintain a respectful distance. I saw her TED Talk, Rachel informed me recently. She's teaching people about the dangers of living for appearances rather than authenticity. Quite a transformation from her influencer days. Bennett's fate was less inspiring. The federal investigation uncovered a pattern of similar schemes spanning nearly a decade. He's currently serving time for corporate espionage and fraud, his carefully constructed image of success replaced by a prison uniform. Harrison Tech never recovered from the scandal, and their assets now form the backbone of our expanding renewable energy division. My personal life has found a new balance. The apartment that once felt like a sanctuary from deception has become a true home. The piano still gets daily use, and my bookshelf continues to grow with volumes chosen for content, rather than aesthetic appeal. Success, I've learned, isn't just about what you achieve, it's about staying true to yourself while achieving it. "Sir," Rachel said one morning, placing a familiar magazine on my desk, "I think you'll want to see this." It was the latest issue of Business Leader Monthly, featuring an article about authentic leadership. They had used my story, the hidden CEO who chose substance over show, as a case study in genuine success. The irony wasn't lost on me. The article quoted one of our young engineers. "Mr. Walker showed us that true leadership isn't about appearing successful, it's about creating success that speaks for itself. We don't need to post about our achievements. We let our work do the talking." That philosophy has become the cornerstone of Reynolds Technologies' corporate culture. We've attracted talented individuals who value genuine innovation over superficial success, people who understand that real achievement often happens quietly, behind the scenes. Last month, we launched our most ambitious project yet, a revolutionary energy storage system that could make sustainable power accessible to millions in developing nations. Jessica's words once echo in my mind. "You're thinking too small." How wrong she had been. "The implementation team is ready," Rachel reported during our morning briefing. "We're set to begin installations in 50 communities by year's end." This was success that couldn't be captured in an Instagram post or measured in likes and shares. It was success that changed lives, that made a real difference in the world. The lessons from my journey have become guiding principles, not just for me, but for the next generation of leaders we're nurturing at Reynolds Technologies. We've established a mentorship program that emphasizes authentic leadership and genuine innovation over surface-level achievements. Your story has become something of a legend among the interns, Thomas Chen mentioned during our last charity. A gala held at La Maison, of all places. The CEO who valued truth over appearance, substance over style. The restaurant holds different memories now. Where once it was the scene of public humiliation, it's become a symbol of transformation. We host our company's milestone celebrations there, turning a place of painful truth into one of triumphant authenticity. Life has a way of coming full circle. Recently, I received an unexpected letter from Jessica. "David, I heard about the sustainable energy project. You were right. You weren't thinking too small. I was thinking too shallow. The success I chased was nothing compared to the impact you're creating. Keep changing the world quietly but significantly. Jay." The letter now sits in my desk drawer, a reminder that sometimes our greatest critics become witnesses to our most meaningful achievements. As I write this final reflection from my office overlooking the city, I can't help but appreciate the irony of my journey. I spent years hiding my success to preserve a marriage that was built on appearances, only to find that true success lies in being unapologetically authentic. The loser husband Jessica mocked in front of her lover has gone on to revolutionize sustainable energy technology. The unambitious man she belittled has created opportunities for thousands. The corporate drone she dismissed has become a leader who inspires others to chase genuine achievement over superficial success. But perhaps the most important lesson I've learned is this: real success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's about staying true to your values, pursuing your vision, and letting your actions speak louder than any words ever could. "Sir," Rachel interrupts my thoughts, "they're ready for you in the conference room. The new Renewable Energy Initiative. Presentation?" I stand, straightening my tie and picking up my CEO badge, no longer hidden but worn as a symbol of authentic leadership. "Let's go change the world, Rachel, quietly but significantly. After all, that's what losers like me do best. We let our success speak for itself." The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.